This is a team effort to make this happen. And let me be honest, it's nice to actually own your own show, because as Black people, one of the things we don't control is the production of goods and services. And that includes ideas, which means all of the ideas that get to our community might not actually have the Black community's interest in mind. So you're going to get my side from a Black-owned station, me, and with the team, and that's coming up next. Matthew, hit the beat.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I'll paint the White House black and it can feature in your front.
America. So we're going to get my side of the story, and here it goes. This will all start, like, I've been in the news. You might have seen my visage all over Cox Media, because it turns out they're all owned by only a handful of media companies. And so when you do an interview with one, they all know about it. One. Two, like, they all kind of, I went in to do a radio show, and like the TV camera was there because they're all related. And the host apologized for sandbagging me with that, and then also, so the WGAU, the Fox affiliate here, the same media company kind of owns Channel 2, and which also owns the AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I know it's because they all had the same email addresses when they would email me about stuff. So, like, media consolidation is real. The Telecom Act of 1996 is real, and we need some Black-owned media, because this is, like, you don't get my side on these other stations. We're going to get my side right now, and let's get to it. This all started, I think it all starts with a plot to turn universities to the right wing by this group called Campus Reform. And one of the paid reporters or stringers or whatever you want to call, he actually is an employee of Campus Reform, a guy named Lawrence Andrew something. Anyway, he caught a tweet of mine that he thought, well, I can get him and then misinterpret it and then get people offended and maybe make a name for myself. So this kid's trying to make a name for himself. And so we're going to put the first offensive tweet here, and I'm going to walk you through it because I'm a pretty smart guy with respect, and I want to put the original up there. And so let's read this tweet. There's a way in which white people in the South learn manners as a series of behaviors, the way autistic kids learn to read social cues for behaviors. Except since these guys and gals aren't autistic, I just feel like I'm around a bunch of sociopaths. So that is a very provocative tweet. So, yeah, hold it up again. So I'm going to explain to you the moves this tweet makes, because I put a lot in 140 characters. Right? So here's the deal. One of the issues we deal with in the autism community is that the kids are perfectly morally and ethically developed. Their ethical development is perfect. It's as it should be. There's no problem. They have a hard time reading cues and then performing the appropriate social cues. And in philosophy, we deal with a lot of the difference between appearance and being. Being and appearance. A lot of things aren't as they appear to be. Right? So you have these kids who are perfectly morally developed, but have a hard time appearing morally developed. Right? So we teach them cues. On the other hand, now give me the public lynching program. The public lynching. In the South, we have a problem with people who appear to be morally developed, yet we had institutions that trained them to be the kind of people who would go to a lynching. And if you read the Behind the Mask of Chivalry book by Nancy McLean, you'll see these institutions are still with us. The churches, the schools, the institutions that make the kind of people who can say thank you, ma'am, and please, ma'am, and open the door for you, and then every now and again, go to a public lynching. Like those are the kinds of white people our Southern institutions produced. So I need a story that tells me that there's been a big institutional reflection about the kind of white people that we produced, such that we understood that manners were not as important, the appearance of goodness was not as important as knowing how to respect the rights of our fellow man. Put that picture back up. So this is the full size, that picture. So this is what I needed to know, that we've done the institutional correction on the same churches that produced the Klan, because the Klan recruited out of the churches here in town. So that have we, white people, you're going to have to think about this. Have we done the institutional reflection on our institutions that produced the kind of people who could go to public lynchings? Of course you say, yes, we have. Yes, we have. Of course, we've done the institutional. We're not the kind of people who would entertain a public lynching, except, give me the picture of Hyde Smith. Hyde Smith? A young woman who just won her Senate election over in Mississippi.
Yeah, I'm looking for the file name of it, but...
Senator, all right. So if you don't know, there was a, you got it? You can find it. Matthew's going to pick up a picture. All right, so there's a woman. You could make the picture small so they can talk to me right now. I don't want to overwhelm people with the truth. So there's a woman in Mississippi who is the new senator of Mississippi. She was at a donors meeting and said, this guy, I like him so much. If he invited me to a public lynching, I'd be in the first row. Which means, one, other people would be there. She wouldn't be alone. Two, she's the kind of person who thinks there's nothing wrong with going to a public lynching. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. Which means it's possible, this is the senator who made that comment and then went on to win her election. It's possible that the institutions that made senators and people who go to public lynchings have not done the institutional work to actually understand what that means. And, you know, the Nazis went through denazification after World War II. There was a big cultural project. We erected statues to the slavers and the Confederate Army. So, and as I get older, I really do understand that unless there's an institutional framework, people pretty much are their grandparents. Technology is different, but you pretty much end up your grandparents. And we haven't done the institutional work here. So today, I will say that manners paper over what really is a kind of psychopathy that is instituted into white culture in the South, which makes it the case that I don't think rights are respected of black people in at least Georgia. What do you have to say?
So, you know, my thought is that people get outraged about what you said.
Right.
We have not seen the same outrage about any of the comments calling for killing you.
Yes, many comments have killed me. I say for me to be able to talk like this and actually institute the policies we need to make black people whole, like I think people are gonna die, and I think that's how it's always worked in Americans' racial politics insofar as black people are involved. And then for saying that, I get a litany of death threats.
Yeah, and you know, let's look at the numbers.
Right.
We've talked about how people voted in Alabama.
Right.
Those numbers are high percentages, so you can no longer say, "Oh, it's only a few of us."
No, it's a few. It's a few people who decided that this senator is perfectly okay. And we just have to understand that. You have to understand that in their minds, she is perfectly okay because there's not that big of a deal about public lynchings. There might be a little bit of a deal about talking about them, but the fact of them isn't something that they have a problem. The electors of Miss Hyde Smith, they have a problem with it. And I think this is in culture because I think Bobby Wright is right when he says that insofar when race is a variable, we made sociopaths because that's the only way. Give me the public lynching program. That's the only. So I want people to, in the full sense, I want people to know that that's the only way a public lynching goes off if the people there are sociopaths. So the question is, have we stopped making white sociopaths? and psychopaths. I like psychopaths with trauma, sociopaths with. So like, I think it's an open question because I don't think we've gone through the work that the institutional work that produced that crowd. I don't think we've gone through it. I don't think the Southern Baptist Church has actually like sat with itself and figured how have we produced. I don't think the Disciples of Christ, the Church of Christ, the Brethren, the Methodists. Nancy McLean goes through a list of all the churches that the Klan recruited successfully out of. I don't think that they've actually gone through and understood what made us such fertile recruiting ground for the racial terrorism. I don't think the institutions have gone through that. I know the University of Georgia hasn't gone through that because they have, well, we'll talk about that later. But I don't think we've done the institutional work on white institutions to be so cavalier in assuming that we haven't produced that crowd or we don't continue to produce that crowd. What we produce is a more polite version of that crowd. But I think honestly, our jail numbers have like, and the disproportionate amount of black men who are in jail right now, I think actually vouchsafes the idea that maybe we haven't done the institutional work on white institutions to separate ourselves from them, because that's the only way you separate. That's the only way you separate generations, through institutional interventions. We have better technology, but we are the same people as our grandparents, unless there has been an institutional intervention. And one reason I suspect there hasn't been is give me the Kerner report, Kerner Commission, no change. Yeah. One reason I suspect there hasn't been an institutional intervention is because 50 years ago they had the Kerner Commission in 1968. And revisiting the Kerner Commission, there should be a picture. No? Not on the flash drive? Yeah. All right, so go to the Washington Post, Kerner Commission. Yeah. The Washington Post had an article saying there's been no improvement. And actually, incarceration numbers have gone up. But no improvement in homeowners, no improvement in buying power in the black community, and incarceration is actually a little bit worse than it was in 1968. Am I stopped? Yeah, good. And incarceration is actually a little bit worse than it was in 1968. So that's a Kerner Commission. That's a Kerner Commission report, and there's no reason to believe that things have changed. There's no reason to believe that things have changed. Things have had the appearance of changing, but there's no reason to believe that things aren't changing. And give me is that a
yeah, that's the Kerner Commission.
Kerner Commission saying no change.
Yeah, no change about race and poverty over
Right.
50 years.
Right.
What is going on here?
Same concerns about race and poverty. Yeah. Anyway, there's a Washington Post article that pretty much says functionally no change. We're stuck in neutral. And give me the graphs about the wage for wealth gap. Mm-hmm. And that's important because various sites say, 5 out of 10 black people who were born in the middle class are going to fall into poverty in the next 30 years, and that's from a Brookings report. And then there are these numbers that say we're projected to go down from $1,700 to about $1,200 in the next 10 years. And not even 10 years, that's 2024. We're projected to go down to like no money to like less than no money, as white households are projected to go up, which means not only are there two different lines, but they're going in different directions. That means the same policies are having disparate outcomes, which suggests that the white number is going up because the black number is going down. And the way that could work is that, like, look, if your grandparent dies and you can't keep up on the house because you only have $1,200 to your name, you lose the house, or the house gets foreclosed on and goes to auction. This white family who had a grandparent die now has $100,000 that they can buy at the auction. They can buy your house. And what they can buy your house, they can buy your house for cheap, watch it appreciate, and now it distorts their political imagination such that they're now in favor of policies that make it easier to foreclose on your house, black people. So like this is the way the incentives start this inequality starts a predatory incentive for the people on the top to prey on the people on the bottom, because now they have a material incentive for stronger foreclosure laws, and because they want your house.
And if you want an example of that, you can look at the population of the District of Columbia between 1980 and currently. I mean,
It used to be Chocolate City, from what I heard.
Used to be.
Yeah, so now it's just a bunch of there are no small number of people who are in DC right now because they got an internship in DC. Their parents had money and they decided, well, my kid's going to work in DC for a few years anyway. I'll just buy him a little condo. And pretty soon you have now land in DC.
Yeah, the street I grew up on has a Facebook page, and I still know a lot of the original families. My godmother still lives there. I noticed that none of the families that were there when I was there are on the Facebook page. Right. It's all the new white families communicating with each other.
I mean, it is what it is, but we just have to understand that this kind of inequality, especially with opposing trends, creates predatory relations that end up distorting policy in favor of, now that we know that they don't have the same interests, there's no shared fate, it distorts the policy in favor of the people on top. So there's that. And so put up the lynching picture again. So that's my issue. The how do I get black people economically whole? So that, because in America, we live in a civil society that's market driven, so you need money to actually be free. You can't just be like formally free and be able to vote but have no money. Like, you need money to exercise freedom in America. So when Martin Luther King was fighting for that, he caught a bullet. And that's the next step. And with that tweet, I was talking about how can we account for the change from that generation to this generation. And I don't think we can. I think that white institutions are self-satisfied. You go to these white institutions that are 100 years old, and they're very proud of being 100 years old, and they're very proud of their traditions, and they're not reflective about how their traditions may have supported white supremacy. I swear, I meet more people whose parents were in the Underground Railroad than I think of that were in the Underground Railroad. Like, everybody says, well, you know, my great-grandfather was in the Underground Railroad. No, you also have other great-grandfathers who were in the Klan. Yeah, you're like, I don't, like, no.
Clearly, there was a lot more support for the Underground Railroad than anyone told Harriet Tubman.
Everyone tells me, well, you know, my great-grandfather was in the Underground Railroad. Yeah, that's not, you're leaving out whole relations.
Yeah, and people say the same thing about MLK, but he's still like a 30% approval rate.
Yeah, I'm sure all you guys were in the 30% approval rate. So the state, where we're at right now is, I need you to account for the institutional change. Have you actually done that reflection, white people? Have your institutions, your families, your churches, your schools done that reflection to make sure that those people are not the same as the people we live with? Because institutions don't die like people do. And honestly, like, people live a long time, so a lot of folks are still alive. Institutions don't die like people do. They live on. They extend people. And so I don't think white institutions are committed to investigating what led them to be such fertile hunting grounds for white supremacist groups. So they're still de facto white supremacists. They're just more polite about it. So yeah, I think it's all covered later, my man. All right. I think it's all covered with manners. We don't have to do institutional work because we have the superficial appearance of being moral.
And if you watch the news lately, manners, they're learning they don't even have to be polite anymore.
Yeah, which is actually good for us because now we can actually deal with the problem, because the manners, I think, cover the deeper problem. All right, so, you know, sexual assault is a problem in all campuses across the United States. I think in southern campuses, we just have the kind of assailants who say, please, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, open doors, and then go to church the next morning. And yeah, and I think that's a problem. And yeah, and so that's what the initial tweet was about. So I think there's a fundamental ethical and moral cultural deficit that's expressed in that picture and hasn't been appropriately redressed. Has not been appropriately redressed, because redressing it is hard, and it takes a quality of self-reflection that conservatives in general are not known for, but white conservatives, especially considering people like Mildred Rutherford, who did such a good job in instituting a pro-Confederate like education across the South. We're going to talk about her later. So yeah, so that's That's my issue. So if you say that's racist, no, it's institutionalist. I need white people to tell me how they've redressed the institutions that produce that crowd. So until you can tell me how you've redressed it, not just passed laws but left the culture the same, until you can tell me how you've done the institutional work to figure that like our church produced Klan members, it was us that somehow did that, then you haven't done the work. You haven't done the work. You haven't done the self-reflection. And I don't think at an institutional level, like municipalities, states, churches, schools have done the kind of reflection that thought we produced white supremacists. We produced it. We produced it. Like what in our teachings about Jesus produce such white supremacists? What did our teaching about scientists produce in such white supremacists? There's a guy, LeConte, there's history departments were infected. So they need to do the reflection about what was it about our vetting process that produced such white supremacists. Social science departments were infected with white supremacists. So they have to think about what is it about the way we thought about social science that produced such white supremacists. Honestly, on the left, I think we have too cozy of a relationship with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was always eugenics. Like Margaret Sanger moved from birth control to population control real smooth. Chapter 12 of Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class has a really nice chapter about Margaret Sanger. Birth control good, population control bad, because population controls us. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said some dicey things about her support for Roe v. Wade with respect to population control. It was more, she straight up said it was more sympathetic because they didn't want populations we didn't want around. So like, I think on the left, we haven't quite done the institutional investigation about why anti-Black racism, and we're talking about genocide and terrorism, has been so cozy in America through our institutions. Because American institutions make Americans. Right? So unless we've done the work on our institutions, they're still making crappy Americans. So I need people to tell me how we're not still making the people, like white people, these are your relatives, through your same institutions. So like I need some sort of story about like the institutional intervention. And I'm not getting that story about institutional intervention. What I am getting is a story about how we're so proud of our culture. So there's that. That's on you. And if you think that you have a problem with that, that's where I am, and that's where you should be. Should all come together and see, like, how are we a part of this? Because you were a part of this. How are we as an institution? This is your church, your school, especially your Christian schools, which are quasi-segregation academies. How are we a part of it? Well, yeah. I mean...
only quasi?
Yeah, look.
You're really more giving than people give you credit for.
Yeah, I have. Without the cultural intervention, you become your grandparents. And your grandparents were not pretty people. Your grandparents were those people.
So can we also get rid of the idea that it'll just die off?
No. Well, first of all, people live a long time. I don't think baby boomers ever die. They'll die. I'll die. Someone's gonna put one in me before the baby, like the last person who went to Vietnam dies. Baby boomers are going to live to 120, and
they've ensured it by making sure everyone else will die sooner.
Yes, very efficient.
This is a plan. They were like, no, we're taking everybody with us.
They're indestructible. The Beatles will survive me. So that was one tweet that people were mad at. So you can take the picture down because I'm sure people are in their feelings about that. But that's just art. I didn't draw that. That was white culture. What white culture produced.
Someone was happy to take that picture.
Yeah, someone was happy to take that picture. Yeah, there was some stuff. So the onus is on you, white people, to tell me and to show me that you've done the institutional reflection, that understood that you actually produced those white people. This isn't an individual, like we all just kind of gathered together on our own. No, there was an institution that like printed flyers for this gathering afterwards, and these were all like lynchings and ritual castration. So like there was an announcement and a whole thing, and like the fingers were sold and pickled and put in the jars and sold in drugstores. So, and this was all with institutional support, institutions that are still with us. And since I know that institutions don't die like people die, I need to see institutional reform. Not just at a superficial level, but a serious, we did this. What was it about us that made this happen? And that made it, and made it so popular. And what else could we be doing that still makes black degradation popular and casual?
So
Yes.
one of the things that comes to mind, so everyone's always like, oh, it was so long ago. And I'm like, have you looked at police shootings? You know, when Tamir Rice, an 11-year-old playing with a toy gun, is still villainized for his own death.
Yes.
How is that drastically different than the public
it's
lynching?
not that so long ago. One, I'm like I said, as I get older, I realize things don't change unless institutions change. The institutions are not, all the institutions are still with us. And the book, go ahead and get the book, Behind the Mask of Chivalry. All of the institutions she names in this book that the Klan recruited out of are still with us. The same newspapers, the same churches, the same, and they're proud of their long lineage. And they're proud that they've been doing things like this for the last, 80, 90 years. They're still with us. Like that's what, and you could, like that's why the Senator Hyde Smith, the senator from Mississippi, is so comfortable like joking about going to a public lynching, because the same institutions that produced people who actually went to public lynchings produced her.
We have the senator who also asked, when did things like white nationalism and white supremacy become a bad thing? They got less airtime than someone referring to DJT as, I think she said motherfucker.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
And it got a third of the airtime.
Right. So we have problems, right? So we have problems mostly because, and people are like, why are you always talking about white people? Why don't you just kind of build on your own? No, it doesn't work like that. And I think a good analogy is, if you want to cure cancer, if you want to cure lung cancer, you can know everything about bronchi and alveoli and like lobes, but there's also that smokestack and the factory that's like, that's your problem too. like if you want to be a lung cancer doctor, you can't ignore the factory that's putting out like carcinogens in the air. You can't just, so like if you want to actually like study black self-determination, you need to study white people. It's not just that white people need to study white people. Black people need to actually be writing treatises on white people. This is what got Frances Cress Welsing in trouble, because she started writing about white institutions, and they told her she was uppity and she needed to stay in her lane. Meanwhile, Moynihan writes the white family, the Negro family, and those arguments are still in the water today. So we need black people writing about white institutions, because when white people write about white institutions, they let themselves off. So there's that. That's the end of that tweet. Next tweet this guy got exercised about was, I said that, a lot of these, you go to, I said a few things. And these are things I actually believe. It doesn't mean, I don't even need the other tweet, because I think I couldn't find it. White people work at Chick-fil-A. White people work at Chick-fil-A. I say that. I go into Chick-fil-A. There's a disproportionate relative to the community. I can go, there'll be a Chick-fil-A next to a Burger King, and white people will be working for the Chick-fil-A, and black people will be working for the Burger King, Taco Bell, everything around it. So I said, you know what? There's something about Chick-fil-A that white people work at Chick-fil-A. Even if it's the same pay, white people work at Chick-fil-A. So, and, college-age white people. And, older, but pretty much white people work at Chick-fil-A. And people are like, well, it's Christian. And I'm like, well, okay, so I'm from California, so I know of In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger is also very Christian. Not necessarily as white supremacist. Delicious burgers at In-N-Out, though. So insofar as it's a church thing, it's a white church thing. White
you can't use In-N-Out on the East Coast. Sir.
Right.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
It's like rubbing it in our face.
If you think that saying that white people work at Chick-fil-A is enough to get me fired, well, I'll say it again. I think white people work at Chick-fil-A, and I think Chick-fil-A likes it that way, and I think it's an EEOC problem waiting to happen, and any non-white people working at Chick-fil-A, I think, are token hires, and it's not like they're having decisions in corporate. I suspect if I went to Chick-fil-A corporate office right now in Atlanta,
Fayetteville, be very clear. Fayetteville, notoriously not a mixed community.
Yeah, you don't want me going to Chick-fil-A Fayetteville with a camera and getting some art So Georgia's a third black, and if Chick-fil-A is based in Fayetteville, I want to know that maybe I'm sure Chick-fil-A is only 20%. The corporate office is 20% black. No, it's not.
I'm about to say if it's 10%, that will be.
So I'm just saying that yes, and so I said that. I also said so there's a problem. Nick Lerman, The Big Test. The Big Test. There's a book called The Big Test, and it's by a guy named Nick Lerman. It starts off, the first section, it's about the SAT in the beginning of ETS. It starts off with the history of Groton. Because apparently Groton's a private school on the East Coast where it started because a bunch of rich people didn't know what to do with their sons because their sons were jerks. And they were generationally rich, but jerks. And loafers was the term of art. I guess in the Southern, we call them people who, when you ask them what they do, they say they sell cotton. It's another term for like just white old money. And so there are a bunch of loafers, and we didn't know, and old white people with old money, and they didn't know what to do with their sons because the parents couldn't be hard enough on their sons, but the sons turned out to be ended up being like rotten people. So they started this school for the kids of rotten people, of the kids of very wealthy people, so that the kids wouldn't turn out themselves rotten. So that's why it's called Groton. And I think Choate started at the same time. And so we needed a way to make sure that kids of old money actually didn't end up being completely amoral psychopaths. And so they created Groton. I said there's a low-level version of that with all of these poor kids working at Chick-fil-A, right? So you got people, and because we want to create a work ethic, but they really also they have $50,000 weddings. So don't tell me that's Chick-fil-A money working at the cash register paying for that wedding. No, your family made you get a job to give you a work ethic so you wouldn't be an awful person. But it's not for the money. The money is just whatever. It's to make sure that you don't end up being an awful person. And so you do that for a while, and it's cool. You'll still end up with a $35,000 wedding, and we'll still give you the $50,000 for a down payment on your house. But
not to mention the $10,000 to $20,000 car they're driving to Chick-fil-A.
Right. So that's not all Chick-fil-A money. Your parents made you work at Chick-fil-A to make sure that you don't turn into an awful person, right? So, and they made you work somewhere, and you chose Chick-fil-A because that's the place where you can work fast food and still be somewhat esteemed. So yes, so I did say that, and I don't think all of that's wrong. I said that in a tweet. No, this is what I just said in a tweet. I put it all in 140 characters, and so that's what got this guy. I think all that's actually founded. It's true, or at least it's a perfectly appropriate opinion. And when you understand that 1 out of every 7, I don't have the graphic here, but 1 out of every 7 white households is worth $1 million. 1 out of every 7 white households. For black households, it's 1 out of every 50. But for white households, it's 1 out of every 7. 1 out of every 7 white households is worth $1 million. And at the University of Georgia, we're not exactly at the bottom of the barrel. So, it's not Emory, where I'm sure it's half. But if it's 1 out of every 7 nationwide, at the University of Georgia, it's probably a fourth. Maybe even close to a third. I don't know. You don't know. But we know it's 1 out of every 7 nationwide, and UGA is, a competitive school. So it's not the bottom of the barrel. So the kids working jobs here aren't coming from nothing. And it's not the $7.50 job that is paying for their Range Rover to drive to the $7.50 job. So that being said, those are the offensive positions I have. If you think that's horribly offensive, you don't know enough black people, because a lot of people think what I'm thinking. They just don't say it. And so that's what it is. So this kid gets in his car, and I get invited to speak at a University of Georgia Democratic meeting. I have a lot of things to say, and some people want to hear it. And so I go and I speak, at this Democratic meeting. I give a lovely speech about how Democrats need to talk about freedom because Republicans are very good about tying their policies to freedom, but Democrats always tie it to something like health or something else, something that's not freedom. But we didn't have a revolutionary war for healthcare. We had it for freedom. So you need to tie all of your policies to freedom. It was a very good speech about how framing your message and actually think about policies about how your policies actually enable freedom. For example, I care about economic inclusion because I think in America, in order to be free, in order to do stuff, you need money. And in order to be conscripted and oppressed, you need a lot of debt. And black people have little money and a lot of debt, and so there you go. So Democrats need to talk about their policies in terms of freedom. So this guy, Lawrence, crashes the Democratic meeting. He's a Republican operative / campus reform reporter, paid guy / I think he was a senior at the time. I opened it up to question because I like questions from the audience, and he just monopolizes the whole time, and that's the video you see, where you see him talking. If you've seen the video, you've seen him talking, but you can't hear anything I say. And especially this video is supposed to be damning when like actually you can't hear anything I say. And the people in the room actually like think I'm making good points, but I'm not mic'd for his cell phone camera, so you just hear him. Like, and then as he misquotes me, and like it's bizarre. It's bizarre. But so that goes, and then he sends it to the university office, and then the university office is like, "What's the problem?" So he holds on to it for another few months. Then he releases the video 2 weeks ago, or last week, and sends a letter to all these donors about how like I should be fired for racist speech against white people. Complicated for a lot of reasons. Because I'm thinking about the cultural institutions that produce the fact. Remember, all of this is because I really think that the cultural institutions that produce the people in that public lynching video are still with us and haven't done the reflection. So yeah, I do want to dismantle white institutions and reform them. But like I expect when I dismantle white institutions and reform them, I'm going to get pushback because
just commenting on it brings pushback?
Because commenting on it brings a list of death threats. I got 10 death threats as I've been doing this show, like most likely. And like with visceral. Probably in the chat. There's another one. All right, so there you go. So like commenting on it so like when I actually dismantle these institutions and like they've gone off to the black family, the black church, and the black school. So like we're gonna have to actually retool white schools, white churches, and white families insofar as all of those are engines of reproduction of the people in that picture, of the people in the public lynching picture, of the senator who says she'll be in a front row of a public lynching, knowing, at least subconsciously, unconsciously, that there'll be people in other rows. And the people who voted for her. So like, I think you need to dismantle these institutions that create a sociopathic white culture. Because I don't know what other name you can call people who would go to that kind of lynching. But like, they did. So we got to deal with the fact of history. And like, we have a lot of people who are just casual with black poverty and black degradation. And we have to just deal with the fact of history. So that's the institutional intervention I'm seeking. That's probably going to be my life's work because I think until that institutional intervention happens, those wealth lines will not be at least arcing towards each other. Black communities will not be made whole. And if we're not made whole, we're not free. We're the food. Because a rising tide does not lift all ships. What happens with a rising tide is some people use their super yachts to ram my boat and then take all my stuff. So,
Your rowboat.
My rowboat.
Your rowboat.
My little dinghy, and take all my stuff. So a rising tide does not lift all boats, especially if they're black boats. So that's what happened. I went to that Dem meeting. I talked about freedom. The guy started talking about all this other stuff, and then he released the video last week, and then some donors got involved. and then the university changed their tunes when donors got involved. So first the university said, look, this is free speech. What are you bothering us about? And then donors got involved and started threatening. And then you have the tweet from the release from. So donors got involved and started threatening. And then it became a whole thing. Because when donors get involved, this is one reason why we need better public budgets. Right? Like, it's because like random old money donors should not be policing anything that I have, like, no. Like, no, you shouldn't have a disproportionate say in the university policy. So the donors got involved, and that's when we get this statement released about how university has been vigorously exploring all legal options. Racism has no place on our campus. We'll talk about that later. And we condemn the advocacy and suggestion of violence in any form. We'll talk about that later. And we are seeking guidance from the Office of the Attorney General as to what legal actions we can legally consider in accordance with the First Amendment. Right? So there are a few things in this statement that I find fascinating. Some lawyers, a group named FIRE, have contacted me. They're like all about this case. So if the university wants to launch stuff, like I got people on my back. Because I'm in the right here. In myriad ways. Plus, I got great class evaluations. So legal options, have at me. Racism has no place on our campus. All right, so here's the deal. Racism has no place on our campus. Give me the Mildred Rutherford Hall. We're going to go into Mildred Rutherford for a little bit. That's Mildred Rutherford Hall. A place named for a woman who's most notorious, like the reason she's still relevant. And I can say anything I want about Mildred Rutherford because the more research you do, the worse she becomes. We pretty much have a building named after, if we were in Germany, Goebbels. Like this woman single-handedly drove the pro-Confederate propaganda in our schools. The reason we have white supremacists today is because of Mildred Rutherford. She won the war in a way that Lee could never have. She won it for the South. She won it for the South. She dedicated her life explicitly to lobbying for pro-Confederate work in our schools and was very effective. She was very effective. She had a purpose. Now, liberals right now don't have a purpose as much as we need a few, Mildred Rutherford was about her business. And I'll say her name again, Mildred Rutherford. Because I know the more research you do on her, the worse she becomes. There's a UGA alum by the name of Elizabeth Gillespie McCrae, who just wrote a book called Mothers of Massive Resistance. Yeah. Has an entire chapter. I'd heard of Mildred Rutherford before, but there's a book on the racism in the South and women's role in it. She devoted an entire chapter 2, to Mildred Rutherford. By the way, I don't have a problem with higher education or universities. Universities are about students and teachers. So the university produced, make it bigger, not all the way, but bigger so that they can see, produced Elizabeth Gillespie McCrae, which is great because she's a quality of scholar who wrote this book, who went in on Mildred Rutherford for a cause because she's McCrae is a historian. Rutherford, if institutional racism had a form, kind of like Greek gods, it would be in the form of Mildred Rutherford. She was an awful human being. And we literally have a place, give me the Rutherford Herald again. We literally have a place for racism on campus. And you have to understand, remember I talked about have institutions done the internal audit to make sure that we've stamped out people? No, you haven't, because you still have Mildred Rutherford Hall. And that's on you. That's on you.
Didn't we just rebuild this hall recently?
Yeah. I got knocked down, and then they rededicated it in 2013. That's not a rededication that happens if you've done the appropriate internal work. She was awful. And fight me on that. I have no problem with that. All right. So, yes, there is a place for racism on campus. It's Mildred Rutherford Hall. Because she wasn't known for anything else. She ran a little school, but that's not why she was a big name. She was a name in the Southern Continent for the very good work she did in support of white supremacy. So that's Mildred Rutherford. You also have dorms named for scientific racism who pushed the genetic inferiority argument that black people should be held down because they're genetically inferior. Remember, this was a white institution up until half a generation ago. The first, the people who desegregated UGA are still alive.
Yeah.
So this was a white supremacist institution. And did it do the deep audit when they started letting black people in? Or did they keep all the white power and just let black people in from the bottom to assimilate them into white power? So the scientific racists that were in our social science departments are still named and respected in our social science departments because they haven't done the internal audit, right? Also, the historians, E. Merton Coulter, these are awful people who have we really done the internal audit in our history to think about how the university itself produced the quality of ideas that produce white supremacy? Have we done that kind of internal audit with a chainsaw? Because UGA was an engine of the production of white supremacy. I have a lot of feelings about the Terry School insofar as it produces all sorts of marketing material that I don't think is particularly pro-black.
I was thinking about, even they've shown they haven't done the reflection because even as we just recently dedicated the memorial to the found bodies.
Not a lot of reflection. Nobody left that memorial thinking, wow, these people have really done the deep work.
Yeah. Well, actually, we know they didn't because the history department was like, no, we have a problem with this. This is historically inaccurate. They were
hush.
Shush.
Hush. They were doing some remodeling on campus 2 years ago, and they ran into a slave grave. They've done this before. Every now and then when they do remodeling, they run into a slave grave. Sometimes they paper over it. And this time, some people caught wind because it was right next to the anthropology department with an actual archaeologist. So it took an archaeologist tripping over a slave bone for them to figure out that maybe we should do something about this. So no, they haven't done the internal.
But even in the memorial they dedicated, they referred to them as unknown persons.
Unknown person, no.
No, we know they were slaves.
Because this is one of those universities where students brought their slaves with them as they studied. So this is the institutional work, the audit you would have to do. Is deep, and I don't think UGA has done it. I think it papered over it as superficially as possible because they wanted all that racist donor money. Because old money is a lot of money, and UGA used to produce racists, just like the Southern Baptists used to produce racists. And the question is, have we stopped? And in what ways have we stopped? And you only stop if you've done that reformation. I don't know. So give me the report again, the statement. So we condemn racism has no place on campus. No, I actually just showed you the place. And we condemn the advocacy of suggestion of violence in any form. We condemn the advocacy of suggestion of violence in any form. Matthew, give me the ROTC picture. Yeah. Violence of any form. All right, so that's not true because that's the UGA ROTC. Right, that's UGA ROTC. I don't think that's a paperweight he's holding. I think that's an implement of violence because violence has a place. There are security guards in the. I'm sorry, there are security guards in the dorms. They're around talking. I know there's security in the admin building. You walk in, there's a security officer because violence has a place. So let's stop pretending that violence doesn't have a place. And I think the most controversial place violence has might be in the football field, because depending on who you talk to, that is a very violent sport. There's a reason why at 40 years old, I do not want to play Division I football, because there's violence there. And there's all this lusty cheering for it too. And if we pretend that violence has no place, then we paper over the way we've normalized a lot of violence that might not be good for black people. So I'm okay with the ROTC. I'm okay with the security guards in the administration buildings. I guess I'm okay with football. I have problems. I think we should pay players and give them lifetime health care. And I guess I'm okay. I'm not okay with the political economy of college football, but I guess I'm okay with the fact of it. I'm not okay with the university coming out with this statement about how violence has no place on campus, because I teach philosophy, which means I have a dedication to truth. And I think that just confuses students about what violence is.
I don't remember the university being very vocal when they were when the carry permits for campuses.
Campus carry was like this close to happening on campus, like this close to happening on campus.
I thought it.
Well, I think I got pushed back at the last minute.
Oh, okay.
I got pushed back at the last minute. But so where is a place on violence? Now, who that violence is for, who that violence is on, who authorizes that violence, these are all open questions. But don't tell me that there's no place of violence on campus, because that just confuses students that it's your charge to actually lead towards truth. That leads them to confusion. I want to talk about what is the place of violence, because I think there is a place for violence on campus, because that's why I'm not like anti-ROTC. But like I want to talk about when. What they say is there's no violence that makes white donors that might make white donors uncomfortable. We like the violence that happens on Saturdays during football season.
That keeps their money coming.
Right. We don't like the other kind of violence. So this statement I don't like, not because it accuses me of something, but because it confuses the people who read it about what we do here. We do have a place for racism on campus. It's Rutherford Hall, to go right there. And we do have violence on campus. I think it might be legitimate, but it is on campus. So I don't want, because if you confuse people, the farther people get away from the truth, the easier it is for them to treat black people like garbage. The closer people get to the truth, the better it is to secure justice for black people, because you can be honest and free. So I just want people to be honest. And that tweet is not honest. You should be ashamed of yourself, university admin, who greenlit that tweet, because it's not honest. And more importantly, it actually does damage it by like confusing people about what violence looks like. So instead, let's be honest. We are okay with some violence. We're just not okay with like non-legitimized violence that hasn't been legitimized by this committee. We were almost okay with personal discretion violence with campus carry, but then we kind of pulled that back. Like, we have to be very clear about what we're trying to do here as a university. So I've talked about that. That's the university's response. Right now, the university is combing over my evals, which are, I suspect, very good. I know, because at least everything except last semester I've read myself, because I care about my evals and I want to try to make the experience better. And I suspect last semester I taught my own class and I did very well. Yeah. So I think the kids, what else is on my side? My side. And so we need black people studying institutions. We need black people studying white institutions, because that's like, to not study white institutions is to be like a shark but not study the sea that the water is swimming in. And we need them critiquing institutions. And that's fine. And I think that's about all I had to say. You got my side of the story, and I don't think I'm doing irresponsible work here. Hey, look, if you appreciate anything I'm doing, because I suspect a lot of people will see this, if you appreciate anything I'm doing, the best, thank you's nice, but thank you doesn't pay lights, right? And doesn't pay Matthew, and I want to pay everyone. So go to my page, www.thefunkyacademic.com, kick down for a monthly, $5, $15, or $50 a month, or give a one-time enormous donation because you really appreciate my courage, because one thing I do here is actually show people what political spine looks like, because this is another thing. This campus reform group that's trying to take me down, it's a nationwide thing. They try to take down George Yancey over at Emory. They're taking down people in California. And they happen to have messed with the wrong brother, because I'm not really an academic. I'm a political infighter who just happens to like books. But most academics wouldn't be able to handle what I've done. So they will win. They will win without a show of courage. And they always say about Weimar Republic, that's the German Republic before Hitler took over. The way it won was because you had a lot of liberal academics who had a problem with Hitler, but they couldn't really articulate it and weren't really articulate it like in public, versus the Nazis who knew exactly what they were about and went and got it. Right? So the resistance was like, well, I don't know, maybe, but I don't really like Jews anyway, so like maybe I'll listen. And then versus the Nazis who were like, no, I have solutions for all of your problems. So academics are a little bit like the Weimar Republic intellectuals. They don't, most of them got where they got by doing exactly what they were told by the most powerful person in the room, which was usually their teacher all the way through tenure. So this right-wing takeover of universities will happen. And don't think academics are radical. Like, they're not. Most of them are just like company liberals, maybe, who just do what they're told and don't want fuss or muss. So this right-wing takeover of universities will happen, and it'll just be worse because they've already won through K through 12 education. Mildred Rutherford took care of that, and there hasn't been an adequate pushback. So the best thing you could do for me is donate to the Funky Academics. Second best thing you could do for me is join your local union, because teachers' working conditions are the students' learning conditions, and I shouldn't have to deal with any of this, and I wouldn't have to if UGA had a stronger union, and it could have a stronger union if you're a UGA employee and you join it. So go ahead and join it, and I think that's all I have to say. Did anything really provocative come up in chat, or is it just a bunch of people hating?
There are a fair number of trolls in there, but the crew is pretty much ignoring them at this point.
Okay. Thank you for your time. That was my side. This is my private space. I have opinions too. And just know that the struggle always has social costs. The political struggle has social costs. And this is why it's important that MLK destigmatized jail, because he figured, look, there's not going to be any civil rights movement if people are scared of going to jail. There's not going to be. So like he decided to destigmatize it. And so he destigmatized jail. And that's why he wrote the letter from a Birmingham jail, not a letter from a Birmingham coffee shop. It's important to see good work happening in jail, because if you don't destigmatize jail, then people use your fear of jail to control you. This is what Gandhi knew. He said explicitly, this is what MLK knew. Also, like, the social cost will be, I've been disinvited to so much over the last 2 years. See, I get invited to things because I'm very good at this thing I do right here. And then I get disinvited once people get nervous. These are white liberals for you. They'll invite you and then they'll disinvite you. And then some black people. But like, they'll invite you because they think, wow, you have something we need to hear. And then they'll disinvite you because, like, I talked to my friend and my friend's going to cut money if I invite you, so I can't have that. So like, I get disinvited a lot. But you don't get disinvited if you don't get invited to begin with. So I get invited a lot, and then I get disinvited a lot. So you have to deal, if you're going to actually struggle for just, like, talk about what it takes to make black communities whole monetarily, you got to, and you're going to take that fight to white people and white institutions. You got to be prepared to go to jail. Got to be prepared to lose a job. If I get this job, I mean, if I lose my job over this, like, the story's going to be so big. Like, it's just going to make... Like, I don't, let me just keep doing my thing, get my PhD, but I'm prepared to go either way, and I'm prepared to, you know what, I'm also prepared to do good things as a UGA grad, you know, because if I get my PhD here, I'm going to produce fantastic scholarship in UGA, and when they look me up, they'll say, that guy was a UGA PhD, just like Elizabeth Gillespie McCrae produced fantastic scholarship that went to town on Mildred Rutherford, just like Mercer Baradawan produced, the woman who wrote The Color of Money, produces fantastic scholarship that actually produces, has probably one of the clearest explications of the racial wealth gap that you're going to find. It's called The Color of Money, and it's produced by a UGA professor. So the teachers and the students are fine. It's the administration that might be a little bit compromised. That's fine. We could balance that up with a workers' union that will support the bottom side. And with that, I think I will let you go. Thank you for your time. If you care about what I'm doing, go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com, and I'll see you next week. Peace.